Hello friends, in this video I'm going to share with you 25 tips beginner friendly art tips that I've picked up over the last 10 or 12 years. I did A-level art at school, but I'd not done any art for about 35 years and then I took it up again. And my first attempts at painting watercolour and acrylic were pretty atrocious. These are all of the little things that I've learned that have resulted in a little aha moment where I've thought, oh, that's what I'm doing wrong. I'm going to share them with you today. If you stay to the end of this video, you can have them as a complete list that you can take away. Without further ado, let's get started. Right, tip number 1, using watercolour paint too thick. Now the thing I didn't realise when I started is that watercolour is called watercolour for a reason, because it's the water that is the magic. And what I was doing, I was using it like poster paints, and I was doing it all wrong, and I didn't understand. There's this term, shock horror, that I came across a few years later called paint to water ratio, and that there are different thicknesses of paint. Honestly, yes, I know. It sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? I really didn't realise this, which is why I was getting really streaky, lumpy, awful artworks. And when I discovered these paint to water ratios, there are 5 of them, starting with the thickest, which is obviously butter. Then it goes down, you add a little bit more water, then you get cream, then slightly thinner, you get coffee, slightly thinner than that, you get milk, and then the thinnest type of paint is tea, which has got the most amount of water in. That's probably one thing that really helped me understand watercolour, which leads me to number 2. Don't cover the paper. The aim isn't to cover the paper completely. You let the white of the paper shine through the paint. If you think of paint as they're like layers of glass or thin layers of tissue, so that you create these delicate, very delicate, ethereal layers and layers and layers of paint, but you can still see the white of the paper through the paint. This ensures that your painting has spontaneity, life and vibrancy. Right, number 3, which is sort of on the same theme, is be very careful when using black, especially black straight from the tube. In fact, don't use black, mix your own. And you mix your own by choosing colours which are opposite each other on the colour wheel. So for instance, the opposite of blue is orange, so if you mix blue and orange you'll probably get a grey. If you mix green with red you'll get a brown. If you mix mauve with yellow you'll get a grey. Then they'll be more harmonious rather than just going for a black, because black is matte, it kills the atmosphere. Number 4. Now this one I was really guilty of when I started painting. I think it was partly because I was so excited, because I'd not done any art for so many years. It was like I was like a kid in a sweet shop, and it was like, oh, I'll have a bit of that, a bit of green, a bit of grey, a bit of yellow. Oh, that orange looks nice. And it'd be all right, I'd start okay, but then by the end of the painting, well, it would just be a muddy mess. The key is to have, less is more. So restrain yourself, try not to use everything. Okay, number 5, mixing unrealistic greens. Now I started my art career or art journey. I did a little bit of watercolour, then I would do a bit of acrylic, then I'll go back to watercolour, and I was seesawing between the two for quite a few years before I finally decided no, stick to one. So I made the decision to stick with watercolour. Now I've got an acrylic painting which is upstairs on the landing, which I quite like, but the greens in it are totally unrealistic. That, you know, there's a shrub in there that's just so vibrantly green, it wouldn't be like that in real life. So to avoid that, you know, having electric green lawns and trees and shrubs, if you mix the opposite of green, i.e. a red, in with your green, it will tone it down a bit and make it look a bit more realistic. Okay, so that's your first 5 tips. Let's crack on to the next 5. Number 6, aerial perspective. Now, this was one thing that I really struggled with actually, right at the beginning. It's always the little things, isn't it? It's the tiny little things that you think, oh, yeah. I used to belong to an art society. I used to go religiously to all the talks and the demonstrations that they had. I would always ask a question and I would always go up to them afterwards for advice. I went up to this I can't remember who it was. I was painting a painting of St Michael's Mount in Cornwall. It was when I was still painting in acrylic, and I couldn't work out how I could get the castle to look like it was this sort of mysterious, misty. I'd put so many different colours on and it just wasn't working, and it was driving me nuts. Anyway, I went up to this chap and I said, look, how do I make it look like it's this misty, mysterious? He said, what you do is you get the colour of the sky, the same colour, you paint your castle the same colour as the sky, but slightly darker, so that they blend nicely together. When objects are further away, they lose their intensity, so the colour becomes muted and fades into the distance. So I painted this castle in a blue, but a sort of a grey blue, so it wasn't too dominant. And so all things like mountains, trees, plants, skies, as they move further away, they become less saturated, so they don't draw the eye. Use your vibrant, bold, saturated colours for the foreground. Number 7, setting your expectations too high or sky high. Firstly, my first piece of advice is don't compare your day 1 with somebody else's year 10. So they were where you are now. Everybody has to start somewhere, so don't compare yourself to other people. You just do you. You do your own journey in your own way. I was being far too ambitious, whereas what I should have done in the beginning was focus more time on experimenting, exploring and practicing small things and growing outwards from there, rather than thinking, oh, I want to do this, I've got this really good idea, I've got this great thing that I want to paint and it's going to be wonderful, and then I would end up being completely disillusioned and deflated. So set your expectations realistically and build up one step at a time. Number 8 is guessing your vanishing points, and it took me a long time to really get this. I'll put a link to a couple of books that I did eventually get, which really helped me. But one thing that really helped me to understand perspective and to get the vanishing point and your horizon line, because I just couldn't get my head round how to work out what the vanishing point is. And it was like this really difficult equation. It's like, why aren't I getting it? And the one person that helped me get this was Adebanji Alade. And I belonged to his Addictive Sketchers group for a few months. I went on a couple of his London sketch days where you go and sketch things in London, but he also did lots and lots of tutorials on urban sketching, and he talked about this term called converging lines. So buildings have a converging line, like the roof line of a building is a converging line, the bottom line of a building is converging, the edges of windows are converging lines, and all these, if you draw a line, say if you took a photograph of a building and you drew a line with a biro of all of those lines, eventually those lines will meet, and where they meet, that is your horizon line. And then he said, then you put in your vertical lines, and then eventually you can build the shape, because you build the shape first before you paint. And once I got that, it was like, oh, I get it now. So it's all about converging lines. But as I said, I'll put the link into a couple of books in the link below. Okay, number 9. Coming in at number 9 is using the right brush for a flat wash. So now I've learned that you do a flat wash with a flat brush, and you make sure that you hold the paint in the brush and not leave it on the paper to form a puddle. And any paint or water that's left on the painting or on the paper, you just make sure it's collected on the brush, and then you dab it off as you go so that you get a nice smooth flat wash. Number 10 goes back to the mistakes that I made where I was using too many colours. It took me a while to accept that you can't use every colour in your colour palette, even though you want to use them. It's resist the urge to do that, because a limited palette, you can create many beautiful saturated colours, desaturated, muted and lovely colours from a very limited palette. And now that is what I do every time, because if I let myself loose on my colour palette, it all goes wrong. It just doesn't work, because I can't resist the urge. I just put that in. I'll just do that. I'll just do that, and it just doesn't work. So I choose my colour scheme very carefully in advance, and I take a lot of time thinking about what colour scheme I'm going to use, because the colour scheme is the mood, is the temperature. It dictates what message you're trying to achieve, and it helps to get that right at the beginning if you choose your colour scheme in advance. So onwards to the next one. Number 11, you probably already know this one, but don't leave your brushes sitting in water, because what happens is the water gets underneath the ferrule, which is this bit here, and then it gets onto this bit that covers the wooden part of the brush, and that will start to flake off, and you'll end up with that. A very unsightly looking paintbrush, don't you think? So that was another one that I was guilty of. Right, so number 12. This one sounds a bit counterintuitive, is being glued to YouTube and watching gazillions of videos, art tutorials on YouTube. I mean, I've watched thousands. I got to the stage where I thought, I think it's time that you took the stabilisers off and just stepped away from your daily routine of watching your YouTube tutorials when you're having your breakfast, your lunch and your dinner, and just, again, do you, do me, do what you know, what's in my heart, what comes to me, what I, you know, start looking around and thinking, oh, that would be a good subject for a painting, or what would happen if I did this? I wonder what that looks like, you know, and just thinking about things that I want, because you get so involved, and so, because partly you're looking at other people's work and thinking, I can never do that, so of course you never do. Whereas if you start exploring, experimenting, eventually, once you've been really exploring something really deeply, really thinking about it and playing with ideas, something of you starts to emerge. Okay, right, so number 13, which ties into what we've discussed already in this video, which is giving up too early. I've come across so many other artists on forums and posts that I've read where they've said, I think I'm just going to give up. You know, I made a mistake, I did something wrong, it didn't work out. I think I'll just throw in the towel. When really, you know, failure is. I think I've done a couple of videos on failure because this has been a frequent experience for me where I've partly my own fault because I set my expectations, as I said earlier, I've set my expectations way too high and the outcome hasn't matched up to reality, when really I should have just stepped back, looked at it and thought, okay, so is that fixable? No. Do I want to use it for scrap? Yes. Can I repurpose it into something else? Possibly. Is there something in that artwork that I could just work on over the next few weeks to improve? Yes. You know, not just be so universal and think, well, I'm no good and I can't do it. Everybody who tries everything, golf, football, tennis, baking, sewing, you name it, they're all gone through that phase of thinking, I just can't do this. But you just have to be persistent, keep showing up, keep trying, and you'll get there. We're at number 14, which is the colour wheel. Another confession coming your way. Right, when I started my art journey, I thought, well, I need to get a colour wheel. So I bought myself a colour wheel and I took one look at it and thought, it's gone right over my head. I don't understand. So I just put it in a drawer and it stayed there for years. Eventually I did get to grips with it. I went on a course and it was a very sort of basic, very straightforward way of understanding it. You know, I was so sort of, it was information overload and I thought, I just don't get it. You know, it's all very sciencey and it took the fun out of art and that's not what you want. So, although I do recommend painting your own very simple colour wheel, just so that you can understand the basics of primary and secondary, perhaps tertiary colours. But once you understand the principles of the colour wheel, there are 3 primary colours, blue, yellow and red, and from there all other colours are made, and that there is a relationship between these colours and that there are complementary colours which sit opposite each other on the colour wheel and they react to each other, good and bad, depending on how you're using them. But I won't go into all the details now, but I would recommend that you do get some understanding of the colour wheel to stop you or avoid making muddy artworks. Right, number 15 is rushing into an artwork or a piece without exploring it first. And this was another thing that I got hideously wrong in the beginning, and I didn't realise, until at least 5 years into my art career, that you could buy watercolour sketchbooks. I thought that a sketchbook was for sketching, not for watercolour. So I missed out on lots of opportunities to explore and experiment. And one of the things, I mean, I've got stacks of sketchbooks now. I use them all the time. And this is what I use for my starting point. I use these for my thumbnails. I do thumbnail sketches in here in pencil, and I might do a rough pencil sketch of a painting in graphite before I even think about using the paints. So I recommend getting a sketchbook, one that you use with graphite, another one that you use with watercolour. You can get your really nice fancy ones, which is really expensive paper. You can get another one which is slightly cheaper. I've got this one which is Canson mixed media. This takes pencil, watercolour, coloured pencil, crayon. This is really good, and I've done all sorts of stuff in this one. Stillman Birn watercolour. This is really, really nice, so I use that a lot. So definitely get yourself some sketchbooks, and before you even attempt an artwork, do some experimenting and exploration. Number 16 is using cheap paper. I must admit that I did use cheaper paper when I started, partly because I couldn't really afford very expensive paper in the beginning. So I think that yes, it's okay to start with cheap paper, not the really, really cheap paper, but get what you can afford. And as you progress as an artist, yes, do invest in more expensive paper, because you will get better results. Number 17 is an interesting one, and it's all about contrast. And it's always a key element of a good artwork. And when I say contrast, that can mean contrast between light and dark, contrast between a saturated, i.e. a primary colour, next to a desaturated colour, because they will complement each other. It's like yin and yang. And what people are seeking in art is variety and interest, but also what people want in art is to feel alive, and you can do that by producing lots of contrast. Okay, number 18 this is something that I really struggled with initially. It is painting in too much detail. So when I painted trees, I would laboriously paint in every single leaf, thinking, I know it sounds silly, but I thought I was doing the right thing. I think I was a little bit hooked on getting it right, and that I was trying to replicate reality. I was trying to see something and then trying to produce it on paper. And of course, it was creating very stilted, dull, lifeless paintings, when really the whole point of art is to produce something that comes from me, how I see it, not necessarily reality, which means you don't have to paint everything that you see. You paint the feeling that it evokes. You create an atmosphere. You're not trying to... If you want reality, take a photograph. But art isn't about reality. It's about feelings. It's about atmosphere. It's about saying something. It's evoking something within you. Number 19 is very fundamental, which is if you leave inadvertently, this can happen very inadvertently, and this happens to lots of artists, where you miss, because you can't always see, a puddle of water, and then it stays on there for just a little bit too long, and then it creates a background. So some artists deliberately do that because they use backgrounds within their abstracts, which is great, and I've started to do that as well. But if you don't want them, then you can get a dry brush and just pick up the excess water very gently with the brush and then dab it off. Because a background, you don't want backgrounds or cauliflowers in your sky, for example. Right, number 20, using dirty water. So do regularly change your water while you're painting. You might need to change it 2 or 3 times during your painting process. Not all artists do this, but I personally do like to do this, so you get nice clean artworks. Right, okay, we've got 5 more tips to go. Number 21 is saying too much, which is you don't have to explain everything on the paper. You can leave some areas for the viewer to use their own imagination to see what's going on. So that means don't paint every single detail. Leave something out. Sometimes what you leave out says more than what you leave in. Number 22, balancing saturated and desaturated colour to create harmony, contrast, variety and interest. So leave your bold colours for areas that you want, where you want the viewer to go for your focal points, and use your desaturated areas which aren't necessarily your focal points, or use your desaturated colours to prop up your saturated, the saturated colours are the stars of the show, and your supporting cast are your desaturated colours, like muted blues, greys, muted browns. Which leads me to number 23. Ensure that you do have some sort of focal point. Ask yourself, where do you want your viewer to look? And ensure that everything is directed towards that, so that they're not wandering off somewhere else. Right, number 24 is really, really important. I touched on this a couple of points earlier, which is don't leave your personality out of an artwork. And it's that thing about you're not creating reality, you're conveying you, what's in your soul, what's in your heart, into a painting. Even though you might think to yourself, well, I'm not really sure why I'm drawn to this subject matter. I'm not really sure even if it's going to work, but it matters to me. If it matters to you, you love it, and it has meaning, then go with that. When I started doing, because I quite like painting in line and wash, and a lot of people commented quite early on that there's a slightly, some of my paintings, they're a little bit wonky, a bit quirky, and I thought they were mistakes, but actually that's just the way I paint. So I don't try and correct them. That's just how I am, that's just me. So we've gone through 24 of these beginner-friendly tips, which I really hope you found these helpful. And it brings me to the very last tip, treating mistakes like failures. What I've shared with you, some of them are mistakes, some of them are tips, some of the things that you should avoid, some of the things that you should be doing. I hope that you found them useful. Maybe there's something on the list that I've not included. So mistakes aren't the enemy. They're just what they are. They're signposts for you to use for your next artwork. One more thing that I nearly forgot is, if you want the complete list of all 25 of these tips, I've listed them in a blog post, and the link is in the description box. I hope you found this helpful. If you've got any questions, do post them in the comments below, and do think about liking and subscribing, because it helps my channel grow. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.